So recently, Pedro Pascal, who plays Din Djarin in The Mandalorian, did an interview with IndieWire in which he revealed some very interesting stuff about the Filoniverse going forward. He hinted at some things like characters crossing over between the shows, which we have been speculating on for a while, but the main thing that he hinted at in this interview and the main thing we're going to talk about in this video is timeline manipulation in the world between worlds and stuff like that. Let's get into it. So as you can see on the screen, I've brought up an article by The Direct, and in this article they detail the interview that Pedro Pascal did with IndieWire where he talks about timeline manipulation and things like that. I will read you this quote in the middle of the screen right here. It says, "I am told what's happening and what the plan is, but I can't share it. They are in the expansion of this world where there are so many unexpected surprises and timelines that they're going to be dealt with." Now that quote alone, those couple sentences right there alone can cause so much speculation within the Star Wars fandom, but I will continue reading this quote because he does say some stuff that's pretty interesting at the end as well. It says, "If the characters were to cross over into these worlds, it will be utilized in a way that isn't meant to be expected. I wouldn't want to spoil the surprise of whether or not characters from the show we already know are crossing over." Now he says he doesn't want to spoil the surprise, but he pretty much straight up spoils the surprise when he says if the characters were to cross over into these worlds, it will be utilized in a way that isn't meant to be expected, because there's no reason for him to say that unless he already knows that they're going to cross over. But we already knew that all these characters were going to cross over, so that's not huge news. Now the big part of this quote is the part where he talks about the timelines. So ever since Filoni and Favreau made The Mandalorian season 1 and the Filoniverse started to get rumored, a lot of people were saying, how can Filoni and Favreau fix the sequel trilogy? How can they fix the Disney Star Wars movies without breaking canon? Well, we all know that Filoni was very heavily involved with Clone Wars and Rebels, and he probably came up with the idea to bring the World Between Worlds into those shows. So it really wouldn't surprise me too much if he decided to bring the World Between Worlds into live action Star Wars. We know that he worked very closely with George Lucas and he sees him as somewhat of a father figure, so whenever they do stuff that he thinks George wouldn't have done, he probably wants to fix it. And in my opinion, they did do a lot of things that George wouldn't have done in the sequel trilogy, so I'm sure Dave wants to go in and fix that stuff if he can fix it. Now up until this point, all speculation of the World Between Worlds coming into live action Star Wars as an excuse for Dave Filoni to go in to fix some of the things that the sequel trilogy messed up has been all speculation, all leaks, all rumors. Nothing has really been stated coming out of the Lucasfilm camp officially for any of this stuff. But now we have Pedro Pascal in interviews saying that there's going to be many unexpected timelines. Now what could this mean? Well, this could really mean only one other thing other than some type of time travel or World Between Worlds stuff. The only other thing that I could see this meaning is if he means that they're going to jump back and forth between certain timelines. Maybe they jump more towards the sequel trilogy for a little while and then jump back towards the Mandalorian timeline. Maybe it could mean that, but I don't think they're going to end up doing that unless it's with Luke and Grogu. What I think he means here is that it's going to be the World Between Worlds, and he probably doesn't fully understand what the World Between Worlds is and how big of a deal it is. So whenever he saw that it was happening, whenever he saw that some sort of time travel was happening, and I know it's not technically time travel, but for a casual viewer's eyes like Pedro Pascal, who probably doesn't know too much about Star Wars, when he sees stuff like that, he probably thinks it's just timeline manipulation. In a way it is a plot device, but when Pedro sees that, he probably just thinks it's normal time travel. So when he says that there's going to be unexpected timelines, that to me can only mean one thing, and that is the World Between Worlds. Now does this mean that they're going to go into the sequel trilogy and fix Luke Skywalker or fix some other things that they messed up in the sequels? I don't know. I would like for them to go do that and fix some little things in the sequel trilogy, but to change the entire Luke character from the sequel trilogy would kind of feel just wrong. If you think back to when the prequel trilogy came out, a lot of people that were original trilogy fans did not like the way Anakin was portrayed. They didn't like the way he turned so fast. And if they used the World Between Worlds to go back and change the Anakin character around that time when people were complaining, I personally would have been very hurt. And you gotta think that there's a lot of kids that are growing up with the sequel trilogy, and that's the Luke Skywalker that they know. And if they go in and they completely change that Luke Skywalker, that will cause a lot of problems for the newer fans and for the smaller kids that are just getting into Star Wars. Now, once again, I wouldn't mind if they did it, but I think that's a very selfish way of thinking, because for a lot of people, they just enjoy those movies, and I don't think they want to see those movies changed at all. But if Dave decides himself that it needs to be changed, then it probably does need to be changed, because at this point in time, he knows more than anyone else about Star Wars other than George Lucas himself. Now, I do think this Pedro Pascal quote does tease the World Between Worlds, unless it's teasing some type of other timeline manipulation. But I think that if you already have the World Between Worlds inside of the Star Wars universe, you've already teased it in one of your other shows. If you're Dave Filoni, it would get even more messy if you do timeline manipulation without bringing in the World Between Worlds. I think that if you want to do some timeline manipulation, you just go and bring the World Between Worlds in. It's not that big of a deal. They just have to realize once you bring in that time travel type stuff, you cannot go back. There's no going back from that, and it makes everything really messy, because from then point forward, everyone who dies can just be brought back to life in the World Between Worlds or the timeline manipulation of their choice. And at the end of the day it is a plot device, and for me it can get very lame and it can cause the storytellers to become very lazy. But I'm sure John and Dave will be fine with their stories. I'm more worried about the other directors and the other producers and writers going forward. But before we wrap this video up, we do have one other quote from Pedro Pascal that's pretty interesting, so I'll bring that up on the screen now. So this is another article from The Direct that's detailing the same Pedro Pascal interview that we talked about earlier. In this one, he's talking about removing his helmet in future episodes of The Mandalorian and also in the other Filoniverse shows. If you look on the screen here, it says Pascal teased that Din Djarin may have the capacity to open his mind to other beliefs, suggesting that as much as Din says this is the way, that doesn't mean this is the only way. And they did tease in The Mandalorian season 2 a lot that the way that Din was following isn't the only way, and I think Din is coming to realize that it isn't necessarily the right way. The Mandalorian actor noted the fascinating nature of experimenting with this idea, saying that Din's future is completely up in the air after feeling comfortable removing his helmet in front of others. And at the end of The Mandalorian season 2, in the finale, he did have his helmet off and he was just looking at Grogu as they were walking away, and he didn't even try to put it back on or anything. He was just totally fine with everyone seeing him with his helmet off. So to me, that was saying that he is okay with removing his helmet in front of people now, and I think he's going to become more like Bo-Katan and her group of people where they just put their helmet on for battle. But the direct quote from the interview says, "I find it fascinating playing with that. We don't know what he ends up being. He took his helmet off in a room full of people," and that's exactly what I just said. He took his helmet off in a room full of people, but not only that, he left his helmet off even after Grogu was walking away, and he seemed to be totally fine with it. So I think in the future his helmet will be off a lot more, and he'll probably only put it on for battle, kind of like Bo-Katan. Let me know what you think in the comments about all this stuff that we gathered from this Pedro Pascal interview. Do you think the World Between Worlds is coming, and if it is coming, do you want it to come or do you not want it to come? Personally, I want them to keep all of this time travel type stuff out of Star Wars, because I think once you introduce time travel into a series of movies, not only does it get all convoluted, but it also causes the storytellers to become lazy, and it means anyone who dies isn't ever really dead, and there's no real consequences once you involve time travel. But let me know what you think about all this in the comments. If you did enjoy this video, consider checking out some of my other content and subscribing to the channel, and leave a like on the video. If you want to find me on socials, all the links will be in the description, as well as the link to the Discord. But other than that, thanks for watching the video, and hope to see you in the next one.